Alright guys, I'm pretty sure I've actually covered this before, but we are going to go ahead and go through it again. And part of my motivation for doing this is I ended up spending too much time last night staying up and watching a conversation. It was more like uh, a talk blog. I forget what they're called now. Oh my god. A podcast. There we go. Between Dr. Mike and one of the guys that worked for, I think, the FDA, FTC, like working through the COVID period and talking about misinformation and public trust and things like of that nature in regards to the messaging of the government during the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the things that was very interesting to me was that the guy had brought up the Dirty Dozen, which is kind of one of those sources of a lot of misinformation that we were seeing around the COVID-19 vaccine, the origins of COVID, and things like that. And their funders, one of the biggest funding entities for that misinformation, or those misinformation sources, actually is coming from the supplement industry. And so I thought it was probably a pretty good time to go back over supplements and kind of talking about my thoughts on supplements, what I found over the years, and things of that nature, because it's really kind of, in a lot of ways, I kind of trust the supplement industry less than I trust the pharmaceutical industry, which is a really, really damning statement. Because generally speaking, supplements, they don't really, people don't, the FTC and the FDA don't really pounce on supplement companies for any reason whatsoever, unless a certain amount of people have major health complications from taking those supplements. The biggest example of that would be Jacked 3D. That was kind of one of the more infamous examples, which was a supplement that I took when I was younger and dumber. And Jacked 3D basically had a compound in it called DMAA, which is very similar to methamphetamine that they had put into the pre-workout supplement. And the way that that was handled was that the FDA gave them a year to reformulate. And basically, I think what they did is they actually just rebranded, which is a common practice within the supplement industry, where if there is an issue, particularly when it comes to pre-workouts, if there is an issue that comes up and they get caught, they just rebrand. And what Jacked 3D did once it was discovered was that they were like, oh, the government is forcing us to reformulate, so get the original formula while supplies lasts, and they had a year to sell off their supplies. So they were basically poisoning people, and the government basically let them do it and gave them a year to finalize how many people that they were going to kill with their supplement. And that's kind of the nature of the industry, is that because they don't have to necessarily do a lot of safety checks. In fact, a lot of the times the buzzwords that you'll find on supplement bottles, they're not regulated things. Things like all natural. All natural doesn't mean jack shit anywhere in the food or supplement industries, respectively. It's not a regulated term because basically anything can be considered natural, even things that are synthetic, because synthetics are basically built off of natural things that exist in nature, right? Just because you manipulate it, where do you draw the line as far as what is natural and what's in its natural form, and what you're actually taking? Like I think I took a creatine at one point in time from GNC that was supposedly all natural. You open it up and the pills themselves were this very unnatural, metallic, shiny looking thing, and I'm just like, oh my god, how are you even claiming that this is natural? So so that's, when we look at the terminology that we see on bottles, it doesn't generally mean a whole lot. And so generally speaking, if there's going to be a problem, it's going to be discovered within the first 5 years of a supplement being on the market. So one good rule of thumb is that if a company or a particular supplement has been on the market for over 5 years and has not needed any type of reformulation in that period of time, then you probably relatively safe-ish as far as you know, whether or not there's going to be a big nefarious side effect that's going to come along with that supplement. That's not necessarily to say that just because it's on the market it's good. So one of the things that I think is where I have talked about these things in the past is looking at vitamin supplements. And we know that there are kind of two categories when it comes to vitamins as far as how they're metabolized in the body, right? You have your fat-soluble vitamins versus your water-soluble vitamins. And it was generally believed, and I think it still is a lot in the public, believed that water-soluble supplements, you can take as much as you want and your body will actually just flush out whatever it doesn't need. That's not necessarily true. And conversely, fat-soluble vitamins kind of stick in your system more. But one of the things that we need to be very careful about is especially when we are going to be relying a lot more on fat for energy, or we are trying to reduce fat within the body. Because when we burn fat, we actually release fat-soluble vitamins back into our system, and so that can lead to toxicity. And one of the things that actually surprised me recently, and I'm wondering where this is going to go as far as the next 5-10 years when we understand what's going on a little bit more, was we recently had a report that said that vitamin D, if you have too much of it, can actually lead to heart disease. So that's very surprising to me, because it's probably the most common fat-soluble vitamin, it is the most common fat-soluble vitamin for people to be deficient in. That doesn't mean that you need to be going out and taking the highest dose plus, and going out and getting a lot of sunshine, and not using sunscreen and things like that. The note on sunscreen is that when we wear sunscreen, it actually also inhibits our uptake of vitamin D because it's blocking the sun. So looking at the toxicity of vitamin D, I still think it's relatively unlikely, and where people have seen the heart disease issue are generally going to be in senior citizens, and I don't think that's one of those things that develops slowly over time. I think that's maybe a fluke or an acute reaction that you're more susceptible when you're older. But generally speaking, most people tend to be deficient in vitamin D, and if your doctor has told you to take vitamin D because your blood tests show that you are deficient, then I would still follow that advice. That's kind of where I'm leaning right now. I don't see it as a particularly common problem to have heart disease along with vitamin D. Vitamin A overdose, and I was good enough to say over 10,000 mcg. You can have nausea, vomiting, vertigo, blurred vision, bone thinning, liver damage, headache, diarrhea, skin irritation, joint pain, and birth defects. Probably not a problem for me because I'm not planning on giving birth to anybody. Generally speaking, one of the things, because I have these in alphabetical order, so when we look at our vitamin Bs, I don't really tend to talk about most of these very much. The one that I do tend to talk about more is vitamin B6 or paroxetine, because that one can actually lead to neuropathy when we have too much of it, and it also can inhibit our uptake of vitamin B12. So, somebody was recently saying, it was a naturopath online, that a B complex vitamin is one that they would never take. And I'm kind of, despite the fact that I don't necessarily believe in naturopathy, and I'll get into that in a moment, but the reason why I wouldn't take a B complex anymore is because because the general opinion is you're not going to absorb a lot of the vitamins that you take from a supplement is that they will overdose on all of them. And again, B6 is going to reduce your uptake of B12. And B12 is one of those vitamins that is really, really important for energy metabolism. And so if you're feeling like really lethargic, that can actually be that you're not absorbing enough of your B12. And so, I would really, if you're going to supplement for your B vitamins, B12 is the one that I would actually supplement for, because that's one that we tend to be very, it's rare that people aren't, low in B12, and there are complications that come along with it, or at least that's kind of how I feel. And it's also really hard to overdose on B12. But that's one of those things, is that when we talk about water-soluble vitamins and them not being particularly easy to overdose on, obviously the most common one that we talk about is vitamin C. And the reason why we talk about vitamin C and we associate it with general health is because back in the day when people would be going on long boat trips and they would not have access to rounded nutrients and whatnot, they would develop scurvy. And when they started to treat their water with their drinking water with or having limes and to go with the rum or whatever, and citrus on their boats, they started to get that vitamin C and they stopped getting scurvy. And so it was at that point associated with health. When you have enough vitamin C in your system, you're not going to get scurvy. And scurvy is not really a huge problem for most of us. And as far as being able to prevent other illnesses, that vitamin C hasn't really been shown to do that. What it does happen is if you take too much vitamin C, such as taking Airborne or forgetting the name of the other one right now, Emergency, easy one to remember, I guess. Is that when you take high doses of vitamin C is supposed to be antioxidant, but when you take too much of antioxidants, they can actually become oxidant within your system and can actually cause more damage. So that's one of the things that we need to be mindful of. And so we talked about vitamin C, vitamin D. Yeah, so vitamin D is, I had here, because it's been a while since I've actually looked at this, calcium buildup, poor appetite, nausea, vomiting, weakness, frequent urination, kidney problems, calcification of the arteries. So apparently even the heart disease thing was something that came up here. Vitamin B is a little bit more, or E is a little bit more common for you to overdose on, as is K. Vitamin K also lowers the efficacy of aspirin and other blood thinners, can cause overclotting, interfere with antibiotics and weight loss drugs, can damage liver and kidneys, destroys red blood vessels, fatigue, And the whole point of this, when I first released this, was that we tend to have this mindset that vitamins, specifically when it comes to supplements, are super safe, innocuous, and I kind of wanted to rattle that. I'm not really trying to scare people away from taking vitamins, especially if you are deficient in something. If you can get it through food, that's always going to be the better choice. But generally speaking, vitamins are not necessarily the best source of things, of your nutrients. And so I kind of want to move on. Let's go ahead. This is a probiotic that my husband has me take, which is, I have a history of gastritis and stomach issues, and so I have taken quite a few probiotics over the years. And I would actually probably say, if you're going to take probiotics, you might want to change them from time to time. So one of the things that probiotics do is that they actually help maintain your gut flora, and which is just the different types of bacteria that are living in your gut. But if you are always drinking the same kombucha, or you're taking all these the same probiotics all the time, what can happen with that is that you overdevelop one type of bacterium in your stomach, and that can force out other good bacteria. And we don't really, at this point in time, know a whole lot about gut flora and gut health when it comes to the variety of bacterium that we have in there. The bacteria can be very good. One of the things that's been actually rather interesting in recent years is that we have discovered that a bacteria that first of all, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. When it comes to lactose intolerance, right, the general idea is that if you don't have enough lactase in your developed by your body in your system, then you're going to become lactose intolerant. That lactase is the enzyme that breaks down lactose. And the reason why you become lactose intolerant, or why you have symptoms of lactose intolerance, is not that the lactose itself is in any way, shape, or form harmful to your body. It's not like when somebody has celiac disease and you have an autoimmune response to the proteins of gluten in your digestive tract, and that constant attacking of those proteins as they go through your digestive tract causes inflammation that reduces your uptake of nutrients that you're able to absorb, and then you basically starve to death, which is kind of what happens when you have celiac disease. Which is also one of the reasons why somebody says, I don't have celiac disease, I have a gluten allergy. That's kind of bullshit, because what celiac disease is basically a gluten allergy. You're having an allergic response to that. Although, if you break out in hives, you're having exterior things. I'm not going to get into that too much. But, anywho, so what we kind of, going back to probiotics, is that we've discovered that there is one of the reasons why we get that bloating, we get diarrhea and whatnot when it comes to lactose, is that there are bacteria that are in your lower digestive tract, such as your colon and whatnot, that do eat the lactose when it gets to them, and they off-gas, and they start to fill you up with all these gases as the byproduct of eating that lactose. When it comes to what they're trying to do now is to treat lactose intolerance, is they're looking at bacterium that affect earlier in the stomach before it has a chance to get to that bad bacteria, and using a bacterium and supplementing with a bacterium that will actually break down the lactose before it has a chance to get to that bacteria, and it doesn't off-gas. So there won't be that bloating and diarrhea and discomfort that you would normally have with lactose intolerance. So that's kind of an exciting thing. But one of the things about lactase, the enzyme that we've been using, is that if you take lactase, it actually can make lactose intolerance even worse. Not necessarily because of what I was just mentioning, but because your body will actually produce less lactase. And that's kind of something that we've actually discovered a lot of, especially when it comes to hormones, is that sometimes when we put in something to be supplementing, something that our body's supposed to produce naturally, such as growth hormone or testosterone, specifically for steroids and whatnot, is that our body will actually stop producing those hormones because the body is trying to create some level of homeostasis. That's why one of the reasons why you have testicular wasting when you take steroids and things like that. So when it comes to, and that's one of the reasons why doctors are actually trying to avoid now giving people with low testosterone therapy, is because you'll actually stop producing testosterone on your own. So that becomes a bit of a concern there as well. Okay, so we kind of covered probiotics and that a little bit. One that I do kind of think is generally a good idea for most people to take are omega-3s. This is the one that my husband bought. I have not personally researched this one. It is DHEA, EPA, omega-3 fatty acids. These can help you break down bad cholesterol and things like that, and help your body in those ways. So that's probably one that's relatively safe, although the levels of quality in those are going to be a lot lower. I would much prefer you putting like more fish into your diet. That's one of the things that I've actually been doing, is that I'm trying to have fish, probably twice a week now as my primary protein in dinner time, to kind of help with that DHEA and help my cholesterol and all that, my good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, all that, and getting that balanced. So other common supplements, I'm going to actually go ahead and I'm going to go and talk about protein next. So I use Gold Standard Whey personally. Do I need to be taking it? I actually do not know. Probably not, honestly, the research. So going into protein, first of all, you can only metabolize about 20 to 25 grams of protein per sitting. And people ask me, well, what is a sitting? Well, you know, if you're having 5 meals a day, you know, if you're waking up and you're having breakfast at, let's say, 7 o'clock, and then you have a mid-morning snack around 9, then you have lunch at noon, and then you have a mid-afternoon snack at like 3 or 4, and then you have dinner, right? Those are sittings. And so we're spacing our protein throughout the day. And if we're getting about 20 grams of protein per sitting throughout the day, then we're definitely going to be hitting our protein goals. That's going to be 20 grams per 5 meals is going to be about 100 grams. Most of us need about 80 something grams of protein per day, so we'd be actually kind of going a little bit over. That being said, you know, what does the research actually say as far as how much protein do we actually need to put on more muscle? The research has not shown very well that taking in high levels of protein actually make you put on muscle faster. Having adequate protein to support, you know, putting on muscle is what we should be really aiming for, and most of us can actually do that with food. In fact, our general standard American sitting for a protein within a meal is going to be usually like a, you know, for a piece of meat or whatever, we usually eat about 8 to 12 grams or ounces of a meat, which is going to have about 80 grams of protein to it. Which is way more than we can actually metabolize. I usually kind of recommend that people keep their portion sizes of proteins, particularly meats and whatnot, between 4 to 6 ounces per sitting. And that will actually take us down to about 40 grams of protein per sitting. And doing that is going to help not to have too much uric acid build up within our bodies, but also it's going to help protect our kidneys from having uric acid kidney stones. You're going to have reduced chances of gout, reduced chances of cancer, and less load onto your heart and circulatory systems. So why would I be taking the Gold Standard Whey? Partially be out of habit, because I've been taking it since college. So, you know, it's been about 15 years or so of taking this. There have been issues with some protein supplements, particularly smaller producers. Sometimes there could be larger ones, where they have found heavy metals within the protein supplementation, so that actually is a bit of concern. That might be where we're seeing that uptick in cancer risk when people are taking lots of protein. Again, you know, if you're taking 120 grams of protein or more per day, you're probably putting more load onto your body than you're getting benefit for as far as muscle gain. And, you know, I don't really want to get into that. There was going to be a sidetrack there. One of the things that I actually also don't understand about this is why, you know, there's an avoidance of carbohydrate when it comes to taking protein. So when I take protein, I take it immediately after a workout. I find that it burdens my stomach too much for the workout, and I can be more prone to nausea if I take it ahead of time. And so I kind of out of habit take it, you know, within half an hour after my workouts. This way of taking protein probably came from Men's Health 20 years ago, and it just kind of stuck with me. The research has actually shown that you know, as long as you're getting your protein throughout your day, you're adequately enough, it doesn't matter when you get it, and if you're spreading it out throughout the day, then you should be fine. And so protein supplementation might not be necessary at all. But since I think most people generally do take a protein supplement like this after a workout, this goes back to the avoidance of sugar. There's actually artificial sweeteners in this particular protein. Is that you know, when you've just worked out, and most people, you know, take this post-workout, if you've just worked out, you've just used up all the glycogen within your body, right? You have very little stored sugar that's going to be left, especially if you're doing something high intensity, wrestling, things like that. And so if you are, you know, lower glycemic and you take a protein supplement that has sugar in it, all that's going to do is help stop you from crashing the next day and replenish your glycogen stores. So I don't think that the avoidance of sugars within a protein supplement are necessary. But that's just my opinion on that. The next one is like these mass gainers. Now, this was not used by me. I have one client right now who I actually do have on a mass gainer, which is why I have this left over here. And, you know, looking at this, there are things that you don't really need. First of all, I have them on 1 scoop rather than the 2 scoops that it says on here. Because again, the protein amount in this is 50 grams, so that's going to be twice as much as what you can metabolize anyways. And this already has so much crap to it that I don't really want to have a lot of other things. But, you know, mass gainers like this, you know, they're stuffed with like carbohydrates, fats, things like that. This one actually it doesn't have as much fat to it, but it does have quite a bit of carbohydrate. It's 253 grams, so it's going to help you not crash after your workout. I'm actually surprised that it has so little fat in this. Is about 4 grams in here. And so when would I actually recommend a mass gainer? And I do really want to touch on this, because when do I actually think it's acceptable? So the case in which I have recommended a mass gainer to my client is that my client is probably 125, 130 pounds, same height as me. So I am 200 pounds right now. So I've got 80 pounds on this guy. And he is just so thin and so ecto. He eats very little in the morning, has small dinners, snacks on oranges and whatnot throughout the day, maybe here or there. And so the food is just not there. It's not getting in. No matter what I do, I can't get this person to eat food. And he's really struggling with that. And so, and I've really, you know, he's talked to me in our last session and asked if he should be taking his gainer on days that he doesn't work out. And, you know, I reluctantly said, yeah, you can do that. And the reason why I'm saying that is because he is just not eating. And if you don't get enough calories in the day before your workout, it can totally affect your workout in the day. And we were starting to see that in our workouts where, you know, he wasn't doing as well in previous workouts when I did get him to actually eat a little bit more. So, you know, if you can't get enough calories in, like you absolutely cannot, it's really hard for you to even get up to 2,000 calories. Now, for my body size at 200 pounds, I need to be getting in about 2,750 calories per day to maintain my body weight. So that 2,000 calorie per day that you see on everything, that's just kind of a generalized thing, and we're talking about somebody that's probably about 145 pounds and somewhat sedentary. You know, maybe they get in a workout, but they have a desk job. That's a guess. I'd actually have to sit down and try to figure out what constitutes a 2,000 calorie diet. But as far as, you know, how many calories that you should be getting in per day, you know, that's going to be a very individualized thing and something that you have to actually calculate for yourself. And better yet, you should go see a dietitian to talk about that. So in this case, you know, this is an extreme case that I am recommending using a mass gainer. Generally speaking, I would much rather you get your protein and your calories in from a food source, not from a supplement source. So let's go ahead and move on. The next one is creatine, and you see all these are Optimum Nutrition. The reason why I'm using Optimum Nutrition again is it's one of those brands that's been around forever and ever and ever. Probably not going to run into any major health issues. Now, there's a lot of information out there on creatine as far as you know, creatine monohydrate versus other forms of creatine. Most of that's bullshit. I'm just going to say that right out. I know that a lot of influencers and whatnot want you to believe it, and if you go into a supplement store, GNC, they're going to try to sell you stuff that may be more expensive or whatever because they're like, oh, this type of creatine is better metabolized or whatever. First of all, let's talk about what creatine does and what it doesn't do. Creatine doesn't make you stronger. It doesn't make your muscles grow faster. So that's kind of one of the things, and it's kind of the same effect as what you see with people who get onto ketogenic dieting, is that there is an immediate about up to 20-pound weight loss when people get onto keto, and that's one of the reasons why people think it's such an effective thing. That immediate drop of about 20 pounds is that your body doesn't retain as much water because your carbohydrate makes you retain water. So once you stop taking in carbohydrate, your weight is going to drop because you're going to drop all that water weight. You're not losing fat at any faster of a rate. Several studies have now shown, and meta-analysis have shown, that when you lose weight, with keto, you tend to lose the water weight first, and then after around 6 months, you actually see that your if you were to do more of a standard diet, cleaning up, just cutting back your calories, you're going to be catching up with ketogenic dieting at about the 6-month mark, and then ketogenic kind of peters off, and then when you get off of keto, you put on most of the weight that you took off in the first place right back on, and it's not generally considered to be safe for the long term. So it's better to not do that in the first place. But going back to creatine, what happens is exactly the opposite effect. So if people take this because they're trying to put on muscle, when you take creatine, your body actually retains more water. So you actually put on about 5 pounds almost instantly when you start taking creatine. Your muscles start looking plumper because they're retaining more water. So what does creatine actually do for you? If it's not building your muscle faster, well, I mean, that's kind of a misrepresentation for me to actually say it that way, because what creatine does in your system is you actually use carbohydrate, protein, and fat as your energy sources for doing activity. But for the 10 seconds before those systems kick in, you're using phosphocreatine. So creatine will bind to phosphate, and then it's just floating around your system. And so when your cells burn off the phosphorus that's in there, so the ATP becomes ADP, adenosine diphosphate, instead of triphosphate, those cells will borrow the phosphorus that's being bonded to the creatine in order to create energy for the first 10 seconds of working out. By taking a creatine supplement, you're putting more creatine in your system that will bond to more phosphorus. And so your body will actually have more phosphorus to make ATP from, and so that you can actually elongate that effect early on. So when you're lifting, what this actually equates down to is that you get 1, maybe 2 more reps in every set that you do before your muscles fatigue. Well, more volume equals more stimuli to build more muscle. So in a roundabout way, creatine actually does help you build more muscle, but it's not like taking steroids or something like that where you're just pumping up really fast, right? What it does is it allows you to do more work by giving you just a little bit more energy. So, and how safe is creatine? Well, it's generally considered actually one of the safer supplements out there. It's generally contained in meat, so we get it when we eat protein, and would I recommend taking it? Maybe. It can make you more bloated. It can upset your stomach. It can make you feel funky. So there are pros and cons to taking creatine. Is it really going to be worth giving the pharmaceutical industry more of your money and potentially having risks of taking a less than pure product? I don't know, but it is. That's how it works. I just want you to be a little bit more educated on that. So this is another thing that I can bring up. This is a book that I've had for since I basically started as a personal trainer. So I can probably actually look at when this was printed and tell you. But oh, look, it's a first edition. I didn't even know that. So I guess was started in 1976. So yeah, it's been around for a while. This one was printed in 2013. So yeah, about the time that I started as a personal trainer. And this is kind of, you know, a pro supplement industry guide to supplements. It's not necessarily a book that I think that everybody needs to have on their shelves. A lot of stuff that you can do that's in here you can find on the internet. But, you know, one of the things I'll point out here, so they have like all the supplements that are in this book, and I don't know how well you guys can see this here, but they've got two squares that they put in this table here. So what is the benefits and what are the potential benefits? So the proven benefits versus potential benefits. And one of the things that like I do notice here is that certain combinations or columns here are actually pretty much empty. When you flip through most of these pages, you don't see a lot of supplements that actually help with psychological hydration, fuel usage, anaerobic capacity, aerobic capacity. Like a lot of the things that we expect supplements to do, there's not really a lot of benefit. And when you go across a lot of these supplements, you're seeing that a lot of them don't have proven benefits to them. So at least not in the table that's right here. So one of the things, you know, I'm not going to go through all of these, but one of the more common trending ones right now is going to be beetroot extract. Supposedly helps with aerobic capacity, anaerobic endurance, and doesn't have anything else listed there. One thing that I will mention is that beets are actually really high in oxalate, so if you have problems with calcium oxalate or other oxalate related kidney stones, taking a beet extract would be a little bit more on the dangerous side for you. So I'd be mindful about that. Beta-alanine, that's going to be for anaerobic endurance. You'll see that a lot in pre-workout supplements. If you feel like that tingling in your face and flushness, that's going to be coming from the beta-alanine. It's just basically going to be acting as a stimulant. So caffeine, obviously, branched chain amino acids. They might help a little bit. They might help you with your recovery a little bit. Might give you a little bit more energy for your workouts. Caffeine. I have mixed feelings about caffeine. And here's kind of the thing, is that I personally feel when I've taken caffeine that I tend to get winded faster. So yes, you have more energy, but I feel like it doesn't actually help with the processing of carbon dioxide and whatnot within your system. It can increase your feelings of anxiety and things like that. And for some people, it can actually make you feel more fatigued, especially when you become intolerant to caffeine or you've been using a lot for a long period of time. Caffeine, are you supplementing to create the effect, or are you supplementing the withdrawals from the effect? So it's one of the things that you have to be kind of careful with, and we also know that there's kind of links to overstimulating your heart palpitations, irregular heartbeats, things like that can come from caffeine use. And I can't believe they put carbohydrate as a supplement in here. Casein, that's just going to be another form of protein. It's going to be a slower digesting protein, so it releases slower throughout your day. There can actually be some benefit to doing that because, again, we don't want to overload our systems with lots of protein all at once, so having a slower digesting protein can actually be beneficial for us. A lot of things that I'm seeing here, like they've got cinnamon, and there's also like people will take cayenne pepper and things like that for all these miracle things, turmeric. A lot of that is just bullshit. So I won't worry about that. Like, if you really want to have more garlic or cinnamon in your diet, cook your own food and cook recipes that have it, I guess. Fiber. Do I recommend taking fiber? Yes, I do recommend taking fiber, especially if you are not getting enough in your diet, or you have issues with constipation or diarrhea or things like that. Taking like Metamucil or something like that absolutely will help with your digestive system. I have definitely seen remission of my symptoms of gastritis by taking fiber supplements. So that's definitely something that I would recommend doing. Ginger, have it more in your diet. You don't need to take that from a from a supplement source. Just eat more ginger. Glucosamine, what that's going to do is it's going to help with joints. There's also MSM, which helps with joint recovery and things like that. This seems to imply that those are a little bit less proven, but this is, a little bit of an older book. I think that a lot of people doctors might recommend still taking those supplements if you have joint issues, early onset arthritis and things like that. This actually brings me on to another thing because it mentions potassium. And I actually meant to bring this out. There's a supplement called Liquid IV that has come out recently. That's some of it's caffeine, some of it is sugar and salt because it's trying to replace electrolytes. I'd be very careful with electrolyte supplements. There are times like if you are actually, wrestling a lot or doing endurance-based activities and you are sweating a lot, you are probably going to be running out of electrolytes in your system, and you can create those electrolyte imbalances, especially if you're drinking a lot of water. So there is a time to be supplementing with that, but I'd be very, very careful with it. Because they're so high sodium a lot of times, that if you're really, taking it preventatively, because you're about to do an activity that you might maybe not expend as much energy, or you're not getting enough, just regular water as well, then I would be careful because you could actually give yourself kidney stones. The exception to that is if you are like running a marathon or something like that, there is a condition called hyponatremia, which is where if you're drinking too much water and you're going through water really fast, the water will actually surround the cells in your body and leach out the electrolytes, which can lead to death. You can actually die in that. We do see that in marathons and CrossFit and things like that from time to time. So having a sports drink is totally justified. Having a supplement like a Liquid IV might actually be beneficial in those types, but I would be careful about drinking these things recreationally, partially because there's going to be quite a bit of sugar to those, and it's going to be fast absorbing sugar because those drinks are intended for high intensity activities that are going for a long period of time. So you do want to replenish those electrolytes. You do want to replenish your glycogen stores that are getting depleted really, really fast. But if you're sitting in the office and you're drinking them, you might be overloading your electrolyte systems, which might be overloading your kidneys. And you're also potentially overworking your insulin response system when it comes to the amount of sugar load that you're getting in there. So that's something to keep in mind. We've talked about probiotics already. Melatonin, that's an interesting one. Melatonin is supposed to help you sleep. Melatonin is I believe it's a naturally occurring hormone in your body. I've never found it to actually help with sleep, and if somebody has been living with chronic insomnia for a long period of time, don't suggest melatonin to them. They've heard it 1,000 times. It doesn't do jack shit for a lot of us. So, just something to keep in mind. All right. Other things, they have salt in here. Yes, salt helps with hydration. It also helps with the kidney stones. We talked about that a little bit. Going back to sugar replacements, there are sugar alcohols and whatnot that are now linked pretty strongly to cancers and whatnot. So there is a monk fruit extract that I believe has erythritol in it. Which is, I believe, a sugar alcohol. That one is one of the ones that has been actually really, really heavily dinged, even before the WHO and whatnot came out with their report last year recommending that people don't use artificial sweeteners at all, and that there are health risks that come along with those. This is something that's been heavily debated, and I don't personally believe in the utility of artificial sweeteners in general, and here's why. Is that first of all, one of the things that actually Dr. Mike had just recently touched on is that when people rely on artificial sweeteners, it actually can, first of all, it does spike your insulin in a lot of cases. So your body perceives it as being a sugar spike that's been added to your body when there actually aren't sugars there. So you'll release insulin, which will put you into hypoglycemia, which will make you need to replenish your sugar stores in your bloodstream. So you're going to be more likely to snack on sugary things and have more of like that sugar craving issue. And so you're probably going to eat more if you use artificial sweeteners and drink diet sodas and whatnot. I personally lean towards using products that are lower in sugar, and I'd rather actually have the sugar there so that my natural processes aren't disrupted. And the other thing is, I guess that kind of did touch on that a little bit, where Dr. Mike was actually speaking about how people will tend to crave more sweet things between, and developing more of a sweet tooth. So it kind of counteracts and is counterproductive to use artificial sweeteners. Not to mention that the full effect on our systems and risks of cancers and whatnot are not fully understood. So. If you can find better things to be drinking and consuming that kind of help with those cravings, those are going to always be a better choice than going for something that is artificial. And all the risks that are associated with that is just really not worth the risk. So for me, at night when I take my medications, trazodone tends to upset my stomach a little bit, so I have yogurt at night when I go to bed. I use the Chobani fruit flavored yogurt that's is just the low sugar variety. It doesn't have any artificial sweeteners to it, and I actually find that I like the flavor better. And this kind of goes back to this something that I've talked on this channel a couple times about, which was the Penn Jillette diet, where and I call it that even though I'm sure he didn't come up with it, where he was allowed to eat as much as he wanted to. It just had to be potatoes. And what happened was when he did that for however long that he did it, it reset his palate so that he got used to bland food. Not something I generally recommend, but what happened was when he got off the diet, he wasn't reaching for these high flavor, high sweetness, high everything foods, and that's what actually gave him his more long-term success. This type of plan can absolutely backfire. You can have a different effect where you go back and you are just like, I need flavor, and you can totally go on a binge. So it's kind of debatable, but if you can actually, especially if you do have a sugar consumption problem, things that you can do if it's like chocolate, switching to dark chocolate, so that you kind of get burnt out on it, especially higher quality dark chocolate. You kind of have one or two cubes, and then you're just like, I've had enough chocolate for now. I'm not saying that you aren't going to continue to love chocolate, but you're just going to feel satisfied quicker. Eating other things that are more filling before you have something as simple. First of all, those filling things are going to stop that blood sugar spike, especially if it's like a fat, protein, or fiber. So that might help with not overindulging in that, and then feeling more satiety might help with that as well. So, I think there are better ways of going around the sweet tooth and sugar cravings and whatnot than going to an artificial sweetener, which might exacerbate the problem in the long run, right? While also opening you up to other concerns. So, yeah, tart cherry. Okay, apparently that helps with recovery, and it's an antioxidant. Again, too many antioxidants can become oxidants, so you really just have to be careful, make sure that you're not overdosing on that. And there's a bunch of vitamins here, whey protein, willow bark, zinc. So I would research things. Going back to naturopathy a little bit. And kind of my feelings on that, I am seeing a naturopath right now for my knee that's been providing my PRP and whatnot, which is becoming a more generally accepted treatment for joint and tendon and ligament issues. And part of the theory of naturopathy is that your body heals itself. We just have to remove the roadblocks to get your body to heal itself. And that's fine and all, it might help, it might work, and especially if you're doing blood work to determine what you need to actually balance, maybe that is has some value to it. What I will say is that, you know, if you are telling people not to take vaccines because the body heals itself and protects itself against you know, these vaccine things, you know, we are seeing an uptick in measles right now. We are, you know, if we got a vaccine for HIV, that would be a real game changer. The COVID-19 vaccines were a real game changer. It stopped people from dying. And that's, again, one of the reasons why I liked the Dr. Mike conversation last night with the representative, or the guy that was helping make the decisions about how to, what to do about COVID-19, especially on the vaccine front. And just how, you know, the supplement industry, which, you know, naturopathy is all about supplements. So, you know, that's really, really tied into this not so great corporation, or corporate structure, right? Rather, that's just kind of potentially more evil than the pharmaceutical industry, which is hard for, I think, people to wrap their minds around, because we think of supplements as being safer, but they're really not. But, you know, a lot of like this, the anti-vaccine misinformation is coming from naturopaths and homeopaths and whatnot. And so we have to be really, really careful about this idea that the body heals itself, because, you know, if you have cancer, no amount of supplementation is going to cure you of that cancer. We actually have to be looking at better treatments for that. When it comes to HIV, you know, you will die from HIV if you try to not take your antiviral medications. You know, that is something that you should be doing. PrEP is for not catching HIV. You know, I don't care how imbalanced your body is, no amount of supplementation is going to prevent you from catching HIV. PrEP is the current solution. If a vaccine comes out, that is going to be a better solution. So, and same thing with, you know, if you get other STIs, you know, you get yeast infections, you get all these things. Naturopathy and homeopathy probably aren't going to be the best answers for those. So, and part of it is that the amount of oversight, just like with supplements in general, the amount of oversight is just not there. People who are practicing as naturopaths don't need the same level of education as a regular physician, and they're not adherent to the same level of evidence when it comes to the things that they try to heal you. Now, does that mean that everything that they do is bogus? No. There are, I mean, I'm currently seeing a naturopath, so I'm a complete hypocrite for even talking about this. But, you know, they are more willing to try things that would be more experimental, right? And I think that there is value to that. That sometimes we wait too long before we try certain treatments, and that is preventing us from actually advancing. And so PRP would be a good example of that, where insurances still don't cover that because it's still considered generally experimental, and, you know, the FDA has not approved it as and the medical boards haven't approved it as being a first-line treatment, even though we are actually seeing really, really good results with that for a lot of conditions. So, you know, and now we are seeing mainstream doctors performing that procedure. So, you know, is there value? Yes. But I wouldn't say give up on Western medicine and having honest conversations about what you're taking when it comes to the advice that you're getting from a naturopath. You know, I would say still have your doctor look over everything to make sure that they're not doing something unsafe, because that is another reason why naturopathy has a little bit of a bad reputation, because sometimes the things that they want to do and the treatments that they advise people to not take are absolutely necessary. and they can actually, some of the treatments that they do are not necessarily safe either, and they're ignoring the cons to that, which is, you know, risk stratification and deciding what's worth the risk, what's not, is part of what a standard doctor is supposed to be doing. So take it with a grain of salt, and I think that's probably the overarching message of this entire video, is take everything with a grain of salt, and unless you have kidney problems, and then, you know, maybe reduce your salt content or high blood pressure as well. But you know, look at supplements as, okay, what do I actually need? And I'm going to go back to protein really quick, is that, you know, if you are using a calorie tracker like MyFitnessPal or something like that, and you're determining, okay, I am just not getting enough protein in, then protein supplementation might be for you. If you're finding that, you know, you're probably eating 200 grams of protein per day out of your diet, you absolutely should not be taking any fucking protein. Right? Because you are well beyond your daily dietary needs, and you're probably actually going to be asking for trouble if you do start supplementing with protein. So do it clinically, do it based on the evidence that you see. And using a calorie tracker may actually help you. If you're not seeing the gains that you want to be seeing, you know, there might be something else going on. It might be the way that you are performing your workouts. The most common thing that I see, especially if somebody's trying to gain size or strength, is that people are pumping out reps going, there's no eccentric to that, right? So if this is a chest press, right, I should be going punch 1, 2, 3, 4, and I actually count for clients. I will actually sit there and be like, no, 1, 2, you're too fast. 1, 2, 3, 4. So on that return, we need to be slow. If we're doing a row, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That's what the evidence has shown us, as far as, you know. And if you're not doing that, and you're like, I'm not seeing my gains, I should be taking more protein. Well, maybe you should actually try doing the fucking exercise right. There's your gains. I apologize that this is a long one, but hopefully you guys found it beneficial to you. And if you guys have questions, as always, send me an email, write it down in the comments below. I do try to respond to, you know, valid questions. And one of the most common questions that I get, and I guess I meant to put this at the front of the video, is what do I wear under my singlet? Like that is the most common question that I get, and I get tired of answering it. So here it is. I go commando because I want my testicles to be able to get out of the way if somebody's going to crush them. You know, jock straps make it look like you've got an overly texturized scrotum, and yeah. So there. I generally don't wear anything underneath. Most wrestlers I'm seeing today are wearing a wrestling brief underneath. Don't wear boxer shorts underneath it. It's going to get all wrinkly and lumpy and all that. Nah. You're not benefiting from that. So, yeah. You know, maybe wear a wrestling brief if you feel like you're extra leaky and you don't want it to come through or anything like that. But, you know, there's the answer to that question. I hope it helps you. It'll probably come up again. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope this is helpful, and I will see you next time.